Hey, welcome to Crazy Biatch Asians, the podcast for Asians in the West. Hi, I'm your host Sharon, and I'll be diving into the issues that Asians can face in the Western world, from culture and identity to entertainment to love and dating. You've made it, we've made it. Welcome to Season 2. I know, I've taken a long break from the pod, but I'm back. And if you've been listening to Season 1, thank you so much for your support. It really means the world. But you might notice that it's a little bit different this time. In this new season, you'll be hearing from a bunch of inspiring Asian guys, gals, and pals in all walks of life. So good news, it won't just be my voice. Stories will be shared, dumplings will be made, and I really hope this season will inspire you to embrace your Asian identity and also give you the confidence to talk about the cultural issues that are important to you. We've got a fun episode today. I hope you've all eaten because, full disclosure, we will be talking about a lot of yummy food. Kicking off Season 2 is Lieu, the founder of an awesome online community, one that I'm sure many of you guys have heard of and follow, Subtle Asian Baking. For those who aren't familiar, think of it as a giant social community of nearly 300,000 members where Asian bakers share their traditional cultural recipes like Chinese egg tarts and also super fun innovations like Mochi in a muffin. Look, you don't have to be a baker to follow them. I burn water and yet I'm still scrolling. Why? Because their content brings back so many memories of trips to the Asian bakery, the distinct smell of sweet bread and sponge cakes. Well, at least this convo gave me major nostalgia, and I hope it will for you. Aside from running all the socials, Kat is also a food developer and writer. She has a cookbook, Modern Asian Baking at Home, packed full of recipes for sweet and savory treats found across Asia. We'll also be chatting about her transition from a classic Asian career in healthcare to following her creative passion in baking. Yes, despite what many of our parents say, it can be done. Without further ado, let's meet Kat. Thank you so much, Kat, for joining us today. How are you going?
Hi, Sharon. I'm going very well. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much. She's joining us all the way from Seattle. So as you can imagine, Sydney to Seattle, there's a bit of a time difference. But,
Yes.
11:30 for you. What have you been up to this morning? I mean, your son's out. Have you been cooking, baking?
Not today. Today, I think my mom's going to take over the kitchen. She wants to cook us dinner. And then I will be doing the Instagram, the content management, maybe doing some blogging, writing up a recipe and so forth.
Nice. It's your full-time gig, so I can imagine there's always stuff to be done.
Yeah, I'm like always on social media now.
Yeah, of course. I mean, your socials are so strong. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Like, content creation, content management is not as easy as everyone thinks it is.
No, absolutely not. And also sometimes you have to take away the personal, because
Yes.
if you get a lot of people attacking you or putting like hate comments or trolling, then you have to like remove yourself, even though it's your content, but you also have to have this professional face because we are a very big group, right? We are the biggest Asian baking community online right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have to like be more professional. At the same time, it does take a toll. But it is still very fun, It's kind of like a dream job, like we had chatted about a little bit over email.
Yeah.
Because you just get to do things so flexibly.
For sure. I mean, dream career, like you obviously enjoy baking, and you've got all these social things. So, I mean, I love that for you. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. You mentioned it's such a big community now, but you started, just before COVID or, at the very start of COVID, 2020. Why did you start this group?
So Subtle Asian Baking, or SAB, as the members affectionately call it, is a COVID baby. It happened in early 2020. So I was on back then it was an annual trip to Japan that I take with my husband and my son, and sometimes with my best guy friend Eddie, going to Japan February 2020, right when COVID was happening all across Asia. You know, we had that cruise ship in Japan. Everyone was scared. My family and friends told us, don't go to Japan. We booked the trip already. We brought some face masks with us. We went there. We had a great time. We didn't bring COVID back. And then, you know, coming back here, it was March 2020. COVID started happening in Washington State. So now you had our lockdowns, our isolation. We were all working from home.
Yeah.
I stood there in my kitchen and I was like very nostalgic for all those delicious foods that we had in Japan. The chu crumbs, right? The chu crackling, and then all the parfaits that we had, the beautiful mochis, like Japanese cheesecakes, milk bread. You know, I wanted to eat all of that again. Yeah. But all the Asian bakeries are so far from us in Renton, Washington area. I have to drive and I hate driving. So I thought maybe I should start baking more, right? Maybe I should start baking Asian goodies that I love to eat, like my egg tarts and my mooncakes and my mochis and so forth, right?
I love that.
So that I don't have to keep driving.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I Googled online. I was like looking for Asian baking communities, Asian baking websites, Asian baking recipes. You have like websites here and there, right? You know, Just One Cookbook, Walks of Life, but you don't have this collective community where you could bounce ideas off of each other. Let's say I want to know how to make an egg tart. Do I put lard in it? Do I put pig fat or whatever, right? I wanted inspiration. I wanted to talk to other bakers who want to bake the same way I am baking. I don't want to just keep baking banana bread because I had so many bananas.
Yes.
So, like, short story, Sharon, the idea just was like kind of a spur of the moment. I was like, okay, let's just make a group. There was no subtle Asian baking. There's subtle Asian cooking. There's subtle Asian traits. And like so many Asians on Facebook are on one of these subtle Asian communities. So I thought, why not make subtle Asian baking?
Yeah.
Invited like 100 of my closest friends. And went from 100 members to like a few thousand members in weeks. And then by December 2020, we had like 60,000+ members. We were featured on Eater. It just kind of blew up.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just kind of blew up from nothing.
Why do you think this community really blossomed during COVID?
I think one is because we were all nostalgic for our you know, food of our childhoods. We were all stuck at home. We all wanted to bake. We all wanted to like feel that feeling again of having a fresh egg tart in our hands or having dim sum with our families or spending Lunar New Year together. But most of us were spending our birthdays alone, you know. We wanted that Asian bakery fresh cream cake. Like, I was thinking about the one that my grandma made me when I was 5 years old, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people, you know, had more time. They were at home. They're not hanging out with other people. They want that connection again. They're hungry for this food. They're nostalgic for it. So the community really spoke to them because there were so many like growing bakers who were growing their own communities as well. Like a lot of people who started in 2020 baking, they've become very big themselves. Like we have Celinda of Macanamnam, who's like the macaron queen now, right? And then we connected with Kim, who makes beautiful chiffon cakes of Kim Possible. So we were all just like growing and inspiring each other and connecting with each other while we were all feeling probably isolated and alone and frankly hungry and gluttonous like me, you know. I just want to eat delicious Asian baked goodies.
Of course, of course. I mean, in the intro of this app, I've literally said, I hope you've all eaten, because today we're talking about a lot of yummy food. So I can relate with that. You know, we're all hungry for these foods, for these recipes. And it's funny you mention nostalgia, because I'm also a part of the group, and although I'm not a baker myself, I love scrolling through all the recipes and I follow the Instagram and the TikTok, and I love looking at all these foods. And for me, I've realized, you know, growing up, I used to go to all these Asian bakeries where they used to sell like pineapple buns or those paper wrapped sponge cakes, Chinese egg tarts. And it's that familiar scent of, you know, that sweet bun, that sweet Asian cakes and bread. And I feel like being in a group like this really brings back those memories. And
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's, you know, childhood memories, but it's also somewhat connecting to your mother culture. You know, that was something my mum took me on the weekends, and it was something I really looked forward to. So seeing all these recipes on the group, as well as, super innovative stuff on there as well, it's very, very nostalgic. For those listening who aren't a part of this group, honestly, search them up on Facebook. Where have you been? You'll get a rush of memories. So yeah, definitely a great community to be a part of. But I've also read that you've transitioned from healthcare into, this beautiful, creative, social empire, with a baking background. Why the transition? How did you find that?
I think Michelle Lee pointed this out very nicely. She said, I went from burnout in healthcare to bake out in baking. I do feel I burned out a little bit in healthcare. I do love it still. I'll never regret becoming a doctor of physical therapy and, the hundreds and thousands of clients and patients that I've treated and people that I've worked with and students that I've taught. I've had maybe 10 different roles in the 13 years as a physical therapist.
Yeah.
But I think it was time for me to do some soul searching. I think in 2020 changed a lot of people's lives, right?
Yes.
There was COVID, and then I also lost my father, who worked all of his life in the financial sector, and I don't think he ever dreamed, I don't even know what his dream career was,
Right.
what brought him joy other than, watching baseball. I didn't know, right? So now I thought, life is so short, Sharon, should we do something that we wake up and we feel a little bit of dread? Or we could do something where we possibly can excel in and take that leap of faith and jump and go into the unknown, right?
Yes.
Where you can connect now, like for me, 300,000 people across all the social media, and then I could use this platform to raise awareness. I could, promote the world of Asian baking and help stop Asian hate on the other hand as well,
Of course.
And also do something that I also very love a lot, which is art, baking, and writing. It's something that my parents didn't really think would make a good career for me. So they pushed me towards healthcare all along.
Yeah.
But I always felt that I had a lot of ideas and creativity, but the outlet perhaps was not the best. And in all of my jobs, when I was able to build a program or build something with my own hands, that was where I shone the most, but I wasn't given that much opportunity to do that.
Yes.
But I think that's why I transitioned, to give myself a chance to see if I could use my passions and my dreams to do something.
Yeah, and I think your story transitioning from a classic career, I'm going to use classic in a inverted commas, I think a lot of our audience can relate because coming from an Asian background, it's that idea of choose a career that is stable, again in inverted commas, and it's that whole idea of medicine, law, or if not that, maybe optometry or dentistry. And it's like that Asian path, I suppose. So yeah, I think what you said about your father, and I'm really sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
What you said about your father and perhaps not even knowing what his dream career is, not having that opportunity to dream, that's something that I think a lot of Asians or a lot of our audience can relate to, whether you be a young millennial who's perhaps been pushed into a classic career and, striving and wanting to chase your passions. I think that's something you've done so successfully. So it should be very inspiring for other people out there that there is a career in something that you're interested in.
Absolutely.
What you said about having this platform to share Asian bakery and sort of Asian baking, Asian recipes, but then also because you have this platform, you can do other things, say, for example, stop Asian hate. I mean, that was a big thing, and it still is. And I know you do a lot of fundraising for that. So maybe tell us a little bit about that. So how has that been going?
Yeah, so last year we did something called the Bacon Solidarity fundraiser, where we invited bakers from around the world. So I want to preface this as Subtle Asian Baking is not just for Asians. We're an inclusive and diverse community. We welcome everyone, right?
Yes.
And we welcome bakers from all around the world
Of
to
course.
bake right? And then sell some goodies and then donate proceeds to our fundraiser and charity in hopes to help stop Asian hate. Last year, we partnered with Welcome to Chinatown. We raised $15,000. We also gave $5,000 to a local Asian bakery called Double Crispy in New York City, Chinatown.
Nice. Yeah.
This year, we're co-hosting this with many bakers from around the world, from New York all the way to Canada to New Zealand.
Yeah. Wow.
And we're going to do our very Asian bake sale, very Asian fundraiser. So we're hoping to raise at least $15,000 again. We've already raised $2,000 within the last 3 days. So we're very happy about that.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. Half of the funds will go to the Heart of Dinner in New York City, where they give, beautiful messages to perhaps isolated older adults who live in New York City. And then they also give them meals. And then we're going to give half of the funds to Michelle Lee's Very Asian Foundation in hopes that we can help amplify Asian voices throughout the world, throughout America, and so forth. And I want to hop back to the point before. It's that, I am very grateful for my stable career that I've had for over a decade, where I'm able to invest in my retirement and I'm able to save away some funds.
Yeah.
It's very hard to choose passion and then stability when you don't have the stability. So I don't recommend everyone to jump into something blindly. You do want to be a little bit stable so that you could do something that you're passionate about, right?
Yes.
So not that I have a sugar daddy, but I do have a husband who's 100% supportive.
Yeah.
Right? So I wouldn't be able to afford my house without him right now because this has not been something that I could sustain a living. Of course, being a physical therapist was still more sustainable, but I think subtle Asian baking is kind of like a startup. You need to invest in it first, and then eventually it'll become something that's really big and profitable and sustainable.
Absolutely.
But it will take time and it will take more effort. But like I said, if you have to choose, start stable, have a good foundation, and then hop into your passions.
Yeah, that's very, very good advice. And I mean, if there's any keen bakers out there, Kat's just named a bunch of bake sales, all these fundraisers and activities that you can join. So hop onto socials and the website and you can check that stuff out, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I want to really talk to you about what food sort of means to you. So were you a really keen baker before you started this? And, I think for a lot of us, food is a way that we express our culture. It's a way that we celebrate our culture because it's, one of the most accessible, one of the most fun ways to do that. So what does baking and food mean to you?
Well, right now it means that I'm hungry and I want to eat.
Yes, that too.
Yeah. So I feel, so to start off, I think I was 4 years old when I first got exposed to baking with my grandma who baked my cake, like I mentioned earlier, for my 5th birthday. And I like to tell people that I started baking at 4, but I didn't. Cracking some eggs, dropping them and mixing them doesn't mean that I'm baking, right?
For sure.
My real baking started when I moved from New York to the Seattle, Washington area, where I finally had a home that had a kitchen where I did not have to store pots and pans in my oven. So now I could finally bake and learn how to bake. So I didn't bake until I was in my 30s in 2017. Started with, I didn't bake cookies until 2020. And then I didn't bake bread until maybe 2019, 2020 as well, right?
Oh,
so
wow.
it's only been a few years that I've been baking, right?
Yeah.
Which gives me a lot of imposter syndrome, because I'm not classically trained. I don't have a cordon bleu background, So I feel ooh, how can someone like me run this group? How can someone like me write a whole cookbook? But here I am, you just work hard, you keep experimenting, you keep innovating, you keep baking, you keep at it, And food really is a cornerstone of culture, just like language, right? Like you said, it brings us together, it connects us, it reminds us of our past, and then, all the things that we love to eat as a child, we could bring back, and then that's why I let my son eat tongyun during, Lunar New Year, and then we have mooncakes during Mid-Autumn Festival. I don't want that to be lost. I want
Yes.
that. I want him to know all that. I want him to have dim sum. I want him to eat food from a wok. I want
Yes.
my mom to keep cooking for us, so that we
Yes.
don't lose that part of our identities. I think food and baking is just so important. And
Yeah.
Sharon, some people might say like Asian baking is not a thing, but you know what? It really is a thing. Google it right now. You'll see that it's a growing world. It's a growing
Yes.
culinary innovation. It's as much of a baking thing as French baking, American baking, Italian baking, and British baking. So
100%.
all very important, all very, very, very special to me.
100%. And I definitely agree with you that, food is a way that we connect with our culture, and how you're trying to pass that on to your son is something that is really admirable, because I think,
Yes.
This podcast is for Asians in the West. It's for Asians who grew up in Western countries. And I think we all have a similarity, or I think most of us have a similarity, where growing up, you're surrounded by Western kids and you really want to fit in. This is not new news. A lot of us feel this. It's really an immigrant story, right? So
Yes.
you go through primary school, you go through high school, you want to eat what the white kids eat. You want to speak like how they speak. So I think for me personally, and a lot of people in our audience, growing up, you sort of not shun, but you try and suppress that Asian side of yourself. I remember, going to the Asian bakery, picking up like a pineapple bun and feeling really embarrassed to eat that in school, because everyone else was having, ham sandwiches, or there's a bakery in Australia called Baker's Delight, which is like a very Australian bakery, and they have, ham and cheese croissants, they have like sourdough loaves, and I was there with like a pineapple bun or like those paper wrapped sponge cakes, and it was very, very different. Now that we're, all in our 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever, we're all adults, and we're all really itching to connect back with that mother culture, because maybe a lot of us sort of pushed that away when we were young, and we're kind of making up for lost time. I feel like I'm personally making up for lost time. So, with Lunar New Year, eating those foods is really important. Like you and your son, the moon cakes, the tangyuan, even if that might not be to your taste buds, but symbolically it means something. So I love that. I love that.
Thank you. And I also feel like we need to take back our story and our narrative too. So I was just Googling Asian baking today, and I was very happy to see like our feeds, like Subtle Asian Baking and my website Modern Asian Baking, were top of the list, right? So if you Google Asian baking, you'll see most of the stuff is from my group and from me, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, you see very top searches are from feeds that are not Asian run. And I feel like, it's not that we don't want like non-Asians to bake the Asian way, or non-Asians to not be the experts, but maybe we want more stories from our AAPI content creators, because we have those nostalgic stories that we can tell, right? We have these techniques that were passed down from our grandma, who learned in the kitchens of Hanoi, Vietnam, right? Which were also
100%.
French inspired. So there's all these like stories that we can tell, right? Which brings me to a point where, sometimes people would say, you shouldn't tell people that you're an Asian woman baker, right? But maybe I should tell people that, because my story is all about Asian baking, right?
Yes.
So it has an authentic spin to it, right?
Yeah.
So we have to recapture, our stories and our narratives, and, be more vocal about telling them.
100%. It's like you've got a point of difference, and you want to be able to communicate that and have other people who identify with that be a big part of it. And I think, there's a big similarity between the sort of Subtle Asian baking, your sort of intentions behind it, as well as this podcast. Like you said, it's not just for Asians, but it is a space where Asians can feel seen and feel heard and feel like they belong to something. And going back to that point where you said, a lot of the people who post, they have their own personal stories behind their recipes. And I've really seen this, scrolling through the group, someone might post a recipe on, say, a matcha brownie, and they'll have a beautiful story about, their background in baking, how they used to bake with their grandma, or if someone posts a traditional recipe, something about, this being a big part of their childhood. So what I really love about this community is that it's not just recipes, it's not just, this is a cake, this is the ingredients, this is the method. It's very personal to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I really felt that I resonated with a lot of the stories because, you have those Asian family values in there. Grandma passing it down to mum, mum passing it down to you, or even grandma straight to you. And it's very like warm and fuzzy.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And like sharing these stories doesn't mean that we're, not embracing our American side or our Western side as well. It's just another part of us that we want to share, right?
100%.
It doesn't erase our American identity, right?
100%.
I love mooncakes as much as I love a turkey on Thanksgiving. I celebrate Lunar New Year as much as I celebrate New Year's Eve with a glass of champagne.
Yes.
And Halloween I love,
Yes.
It's just another part of us, but
Yes.
it doesn't make us any less American or any less Western.
Yes.
And we're not trying to say that it's better. It's not. It's just another story that we want to tell. And so that, when someone features something on Lunar New Year or they do like, a bake-off that's Asian related and things like that it's done a little bit more respectfully. Right? That you're
100%.
telling the stories that should be told, right?
100%. Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people get a little offended when we embrace our Asian side, especially as Asian women. But at the same time, why are we being erased? Why do we have to shut off our identities and who we are, right?
100%. 100%.
Like I said, I'm as proud of being an Asian American woman as much as I am proud of being an American woman.
100%. And I think that's the beauty of being, cross-cultural and having an ethnicity that is your mother country, but also being part of, for example, for you, America, and for me, Australia. That's the beauty of the whole immigrant story because you're part of both cultures. And you celebrate the great things in both cultures. And you're right, just because you're a part of this group or just because you listen to this podcast, it doesn't mean that you're shunning your, Western side. There's so many different facets of every person. And I think for Asians living in the West, you've got both sides, considering the political landscape, considering the social landscape. It's really, really important to be to tell the stories that we perhaps haven't been able to, perhaps our parents haven't been able to, because when they grew up in Western countries, so when they grew up in America or Australia, perhaps society wasn't as open. So I think what you're doing is really beautiful. And anyone who is not a part of the group, what are you doing? Hop on there. Aside from the Facebook group and all the socials that you run, you also have a recipe book. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so, since we're on video, I do have a... My husband took a picture.
I love that. I love
that. It's not the book yet. So this is for all of my promos. So this is a fun story. It's called Modern Asian Baking at Home. I like to tell people that it took me 13 years to publish this book. Because a long time ago, I wanted to write Asian rom-coms, young adult novels.
Yeah.
And I went to the point where I had an agent, a literary agent who was very interested in the book. And I was so happy. I was like, ooh, I'm going to be the next Meg Cabot or whoever, right?
Yes.
Dreams were dashed. I lost the contract. She got sick. And then I was also told by my writing mentor back then that, books with Asian characters don't sell. Back then it wasn't, Asian culture wasn't as profitable, they would say, right? We didn't have the Crazy Rich Asian movie out yet. We didn't have Shang-Chi. We didn't have, Bling Empire, all of that. So I basically, just forgot about my writing dreams, went on to becoming a physical therapist, self-published some books, sold 50,000 copies on my own. But then just e-copies.
Yeah, amazing.
Digital copies. And then I was like, okay, I'm just going to be sustainable and, do something that's stable like my parents wanted, right? And then And then after Subtle Asian Baking happened, and then Eater featured us in an article in 2020. So thank you, Jessica Wei, for writing that article. It's amazing. You know, that really launched everything for us, I have to say. Then an editor came out of nowhere, emailed Subtle Asian Baking and asked, "Are you guys working on a book?" Turns out he's legit. He's an acquisition editor of Quarto Books. And then, you know, he was interested in like a recipe book from the Subtle Asian group, you know, finding all of these trendy, amazing, traditional and modern recipes that we can put into a book. And I was like, you know, I'm a writer, you know, like deep inside, I'm a writer. I could do this, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't know what I was getting into. It became a full-time job, basically, while I was still working. So I wrote during ungodly hours, you know, midnight, on all of the weekends, you know. The deadlines were very tight. You only have a few months to write a whole book, 68 recipes, then you have to do all the recipe testing. And now I'm a full-time marketer for the book.
Yes.
Full-time content strategist, you know. So it's quite an interesting journey. Like if anyone who wants to write a cookbook, be prepared. You're going to do a lot more marketing than you're going to be writing. So that's a little bit of an advice from me. But I'm very appreciative and I'm so happy. It's going to come out June 28th. Very auspicious. 6/28/2022.
Yeah,
so,
I love that.
Look out for that. It's ready for pre-orders right now. All you have to do is Google Modern Asian Baking at home, or you could go to our website, modernasianbaking.com/pre-order, and then you could find all of the links where you could order it worldwide.
I love that. Well, I will put the website in the description. So for anyone who's really keen to get the cookbook and want to find out more, it'll all be in the episode notes. Let's get into some fun stuff. I admittedly am a baking novice. I'm a baking noob. I burn water. So I'd love to know a little bit about baking. So you said that Asian baking is different to, say, French, American, Italian baking. What is like the number one point of difference in your opinion?
There's a few, but I guess the number one that you could jump into would be the ingredients, right? And the flavor profiles, right? So you could actually use soy sauce, miso as your salt component. And your umami component. Yeah, I put miso into all of my cookies and my brownies. God. For your spice component, gochujang, right? You could use that sriracha. Right? You can make truffles that are spicy with those ingredients. Right. Of course, everyone knows matcha, right? Yes. And now people are embracing ube, right? Yes. The beautiful, vibrant purple ube. You have the lime green of pandan. It's so fragrant. It's like a young coconut floral. It's the vanilla of Asia, people like to say, right? So I think that's one. That's number one, would be the flavors and the ingredients. Number two would be, like the techniques, right? You could steam things, right? It's similar to a bain-marie, but you could steam buns and baos and full cakes, malaigo, right, for Lunar New Year. Then you have frying, you have boiling. You could use the microwave to make mochi, right? And then number three would be the texture. Right, you have your QQ, which is your boba, so you're nice and chewy. And then you have your airiness, your chiffon cakes, right? Your Japanese cheesecake. So the airiness, the chewiness, and all these things make Asian baking very special. Yes. And at the same time, the differences can also be subtle, because then you could still make, your best cheesecake, add like miso and matcha into it, and now you have a subtle Asian best cheesecake.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And you could, like you said, the matcha brownies. I mean, brownies is a Western creation, but you could put an Asian spin to it and make it subtly Asian, right? And then you have all your traditional goodies as well. And then finally, of course, my favorite right now is my famous milk bread of all flavors and colors. Yeah. So it's what makes that different is that it's more fat involved. So butter and milk. But at the same time, you could make it sustainably vegan as well with your plant-based milks and your egg substitutes and so forth. So absolutely, all the things that make Asian baking special.
Absolutely. I think my mom and my grandma used to say this one thing about Asian baking. I mean, it's a compliment when they say, it's not so sweet. Because I think to sort of the older Asian generation, a lot of Western cakes are very, very sugary. And Asian baking tend to not use as much sugar, and it's more sort of egg white based or milk based. So when they would buy things and they say, it's not too sweet, you know it's a good thing.
It might be more of an East Asian thing, because I know my Indian friends, and I have a lot of them in this community in my neighborhood. They do love sweets that are a little sweeter than what I like. So but I know like my East Asian friends and family, and including myself, and even my son at 8 years old, we don't like things that are too sweet, like that aches your teeth sweet, right? We like it subtle, right? Like your milk bread's just a little bit of sugar. But my Filipino husband, he does like things that are a bit sweeter. So his tooth is a little sweeter than ours. So it's not all of us, but yes, the ultimate compliment is when I present like something that I bake to my mom, and she's like, my whole team, not that sweet. And then I'm like, oh, great. You know, she'll never say it's delicious. Like, my husband will make boxed mac and cheese, and she'll be like, Jake, this is so good. Oh my God, so delicious. I'll present her with a Japanese cheesecake that's beautiful, fluffy, and non-cracked, and she'll be like, oh, not too sweet.
I've seen on the group, and I think you've mentioned it throughout this conversation, but I've seen on the group so many innovative recipes. So like you mentioned, miso. I've actually seen miso banana bread. I've seen matcha mochi. I've seen mochi in a muffin. I think I came across that. What are the most innovative things that you've seen?
That's so hard to say. So during Mid-Autumn Festival, when we had our Mid-Autumn Festival bake-off, I think one of the most innovative things were all of the mooncakes that people were able to make without a mold. So they made beautiful, cute bunnies this year that are mochi bunnies. They were so cute and beautiful with all different colors and different flavors. I think that was super innovative. And all the 1,000-layer mooncakes with all the different colors and flavors as well, the rainbow colored ones. I think that was super innovative.
I love that.
Close to the end of last year. This year, if you look at the feed for our Lunar New Year, Year of the Tiger bake-off, oh my gosh, 400 unique entries, over 400 unique entries of amazing baked goodies, all that are nostalgic for Lunar New Year. So, and then myself, I made like these cute milk bread buns that were orange with carrot powder and black cocoa. So they were cute little tiger stripes and oranges, and then milk bread that was tiger stripes.
Yeah, nice. So, you know, going along with the theme of each Lunar New Year with the year of the insert animal, all that stuff is, I don't know, I feel like personally really fun to see, because watching it come to life, watching people's creativity and how they interpret, you know, this year the tiger, or, you know, next year whatever animal, it's... Gosh, I don't even know what next year is.
The bunny.
Oh, that's going to be interesting. That's going to be interesting. But look, let's do something fun. We're going to move on to a game. It's this or that, super quick. I'm going to ask you 5 different questions. So this or that, and you're going to pick one. These are all food related. I mean, considering the episode, they're all Asian baking related. Number 1, matcha or ube?
Ube.
Oh, nice. Okay. Second one, Japanese souffle cheesecake or Japanese souffle pancake?
Has to be the cheesecake.
Ah, okay. Why is that?
It started my whole baking, my love for Asian baking. I think it is the Japanese cheesecake, and it's so hard to perfect, but once you perfect it, you're like, oh, I can't have another type of cheesecake, though I love all kinds of cheesecake. It's not good for my belly. But yeah, I think Japanese cheesecake is the perfect face of Asian baking.
Yeah. Number 3, pineapple buns or paper wrapped sponge cake?
Right now, paper wrapped sponge cake, because that's very nostalgic for me. My dad used to love it. We used to buy it all the time. And there's one in New York Chinatown. I think it's called Gamhing. It's a very famous bakery. It's so good. It tastes like a marshmallow in your mouth.
Number 4, mango pancake or Chinese egg tarts?
Oh, this is so hard.
Yes. Difficult one.
Okay, I'll go with the egg tart. I'll go, because once you have an egg tart that comes straight out of the oven with that flaky, crispy tart pastry.
Yes.
You can't beat that.
Okay, I don't know if this one's going to be a difficult one, but traditional mooncake or snow skin mooncake?
Right now, I have to say snow skin because with the durian in it and it's cold and so good. And the chewiness, it's just everything delicious for me.
Yeah.
And with traditional mooncakes, if it doesn't have like a huge salty egg yolk, I'm like, I can't eat that. I'm so bad.
No, I totally know what you mean. It's like a different texture as well. The traditional mooncakes are like a lot oilier, whereas the snow skin's a bit more refreshing and you can take it straight out of the fridge. Love that. That brings us to the end of it. Is there anything else you'd like to add in this podcast? Anything we may have forgotten?
But I want to say thank you so much for having me. I
Thank
love that you look like a cupcake today, a beautiful cupcake.
I look like one of those retro like ice cream women.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you are going with season 2 and starting it off with
thank
us.
you.
So I'm very honored and very appreciative.
No, honestly, I should thank you because, I mean, you're the founder of this giant Asian community, which I'm sure that like the bulk of our audience follow. So having you on, I'm extremely, extremely honored.
And I feel it's so important because, we need to lift each other up. Sometimes the media will not focus on us as much, right?
Yes.
Despite having all of the, the Simulu out there and things like that, That's why we need to elevate each other,
100%.
Uplift each other, and
100%.
Spread the word,
100%.
Help each other out.
Yeah.
So I'm so grateful to you.
Thank you. And speaking of uplifting, that is the one word I would describe subtle Asian baking. It's extremely uplifting, brings everybody together. If you're in a bad mood, scroll through the page. It's fantastic. So I'll put all the links in the episode notes and you can follow Kat, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, website, cookbook, everywhere.
Thank you so much.
But thank you. Have a lovely day.
Yeah. Happy baking, everyone.
Happy baking. Okay, I'm really hungry after doing this episode, so I'm off to grab some food. As mentioned before, all of the links to Subtle Asian Baking will be in the episode notes. I want to thank everyone again for all your support during Season 1. Season 2 will be better than ever. It was actually surprising to me that during the break, our episodes were still getting plenty of listens, so I really do appreciate you guys who've shared the pod to your friends and family. I thought it'd be fun to give a shout out to some interesting places that have Crazy Biatch Asians in them. So if you hear your city, shoot me a DM on Insta. I'd love to see you. Shout out to Querétaro in Santiago, Mexico, Georgetown in the Cayman Islands, and Guwahati in India. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. I'm on YouTube under the same name, and if you want a daily dose of the best Asian memes, then just head to the Instagram at Crazy Biatch Asians. See you in 2 weeks. Bye!